It's a bitter, suffocating feeling when you realize your entire life was a lie. But that's exactly what hit me the moment Ryan confessed. It wasn't the cancer that tore me apart, no, that was expected, even if it was devastating. It was the truth he spilled from his dying lips. Emily wasn't really my daughter, and neither was Sarah, for that matter. That's when it all started to unravel. I had loved a man who betrayed me at every turn, but I never saw the real betrayal coming not from him, but from Linda. Linda, the woman who had wormed her way into our lives, who I thought was nothing more than a typical sister-in-law. How naive I had been. That day, when the test results came in and Ryan locked himself away, I had no idea how everything would shift. When Linda arrived, pushing her way into our home like she had some right to be there, I felt the first rip of the veil. Her cold eyes and sharp words started unraveling something much deeper than I could have imagined. "Is Emily back yet?" she asked, her voice laced with something that didn't sit right. "No," I replied, my pulse quickening. "She won't be home for another 2 weeks." Linda's eyes flashed with something relief, suspicion. It was hard to tell, but I had no time to linger on it. The tension in the room was palpable, thick enough to choke on. I felt it, the unease swirling as Linda stepped further into the living room without another word, brushing past me like I wasn't even there. The door to the study creaked open, and Ryan finally emerged, his face pale, a shadow of the man I once knew. His eyes met Linda's, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. I waited, the air in my lungs frozen. "You know, Ryan," Linda's voice broke the silence. "It's time you told Emily. You can't keep this from her." The words hung in the air like a challenge, a dare. Ryan's eyes flickered, and something in me snapped. All these years, I had kept my mouth shut, enduring the insults and the coldness. But this was the moment where everything began to shift. "Tell me what?" I asked, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. Linda's gaze met mine, sharp, calculating. "Tell her the truth about Sarah," she said, but there was something else, something deeper, something darker hidden in her tone. My blood ran cold. Ryan stood there, frozen, staring at Linda like she had just thrown him into an abyss. I could feel the weight of the silence crush the room. "Anna," he whispered, finally meeting my eyes, "I'm sorry." And just like that, my whole world started to crumble. I didn't know what to say. My heart was pounding, every beat louder than the last. Ryan's confession hit me like a freight train, but there was something more beneath it. I could see it in his eyes, guilt, regret, and something darker, as if every moment he'd spent with me had been a lie. "Ryan, what do you mean?" My voice barely came out, trembling, unsure if I even wanted to hear what he was about to say. He took a deep breath, his face drawn tight. I could see the weight of the world bearing down on him. He knew what was coming, and yet, he was still dragging it out. She's not really my daughter." The words barely left his lips before the room seemed to close in on me, the walls pressing in, suffocating me. My hands shook, but I stayed still, waiting for the truth to settle, or perhaps to shatter me completely. Linda watched the entire scene unfold with cold detachment, her gaze flickering between us like a spectator at a show. Her lips curled into a tight smile, but it wasn't the kind that offered comfort. "Ryan," she said softly, as if coaxing a confession from a child, "you need to tell her everything." Ryan's gaze shifted to Linda, then back to me. He looked at me with those eyes, those sad, tired eyes, and for a moment, I saw the man I had loved, the man I had married. But that man was already gone. What stood before me now was a broken shell, a man too far gone to fix his wrongs. "I'm sorry, Anna," he said again, his voice cracking, and I could see the tears welling up in his eyes, though he didn't let them fall. He took my hand, gripping it weakly. "Emily, she's Linda's and my child. We switched the babies." I froze. The world seemed to tilt beneath my feet, and I stumbled back a step. My mind couldn't process what he was saying, but my body had already gone cold, as though it had known the truth long before my ears did. Linda was watching me with something close to amusement, like she was waiting for the moment I'd snap. But I didn't. I just stood there, my mind racing, my heart in freefall. "What?" I whispered. "Sarah," Ryan continued, his voice weak. She's your real daughter. I switched them after birth. I didn't know what to do with the information, how to react. I wanted to scream, to break something, but I felt numb. My entire life, the one I thought I'd built with Ryan, had just crumbled into dust. Linda shifted in her seat, folding her arms, her eyes calculating. "You should have known all along, Anna. I'm sure it's not the first time you suspected something. But the truth is," she continued, her voice laced with venom, "I never meant to hurt you. Not really. I was just protecting my own." Her words felt like a slap, even though they were wrapped in a soft, syrupy tone. The anger in me boiled over, but I swallowed it down. "You switched my child?" My voice was low, barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of 1,000 betrayals. I looked at Ryan, his face pale, his eyes unable to meet mine. I felt disgusted, betrayed, not just by him, but by Linda as well. The woman who had helped create this mess, who had ruined everything in her blind greed. "And why?" I demanded, my voice now shaking with rage. "Why did you do it? Was it for your precious inheritance? Or because you never thought Sarah would be worth anything?" Ryan's eyes darted to Linda, his face tight with a mixture of guilt and something darker fear. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Linda shrugged. "I don't have to explain myself to you, Anna. It's over now, isn't it? It's done." Her smile twisted into something cruel. Everything in me wanted to lash out, but I held my ground. I had raised Emily as my own, loved her fiercely for over 2 decades, and now I was expected to accept that she wasn't even mine. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. Ryan's confession wasn't the only thing that shattered me. It was the way Linda spoke so coldly, so matter-of-factly. She had planned this. She had orchestrated it all, and now she stood there like she'd won. Like she was entitled to everything. "You've done enough, Linda," I spat, my voice finally rising. "You've done more than enough." Ryan looked at me, but there was nothing left in his eyes. Nothing that resembled the man I had married. "And I am sorry. But the will, it's all for Emily now. She deserves it. She deserves everything." I looked down at my hands, the shaking finally starting to make sense. I was the fool in this story, the one who had trusted, who had loved blindly, the one who had let my guard down, only to have it all ripped away in an instant. And then, something inside me snapped. "Emily deserves everything," I repeated, but the words felt like ash in my mouth. "And so does Sarah." I didn't even know if I was speaking to Ryan anymore. The man who had made me question everything. The man who had treated me like a pawn in a game of his making. "Anna, don't," Ryan whispered, his voice hoarse. "Please, don't do this. Don't destroy everything we've built." But I was already beyond hearing him. Everything that had been built had already crumbled beneath my feet. And now I was left standing in the ruins, looking at the 2 people who had destroyed my life. The world was spinning, and all I could think about was how I would make them pay. I turned my back on Ryan and Linda, the weight of their words still hanging in the air like a thick fog. The betrayal was suffocating, but I was done allowing them to control the narrative. I was done letting them manipulate me, letting them think they could get away with this. I wasn't the same woman anymore. The woman who had stood by Ryan's side, who had put up with his family's cruel whispers and endless betrayals, she was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, someone who knew the truth and wasn't afraid to act on it. I went straight to my bedroom, locking the door behind me. For the first time in what felt like years, I let myself cry. It wasn't for Ryan. It wasn't even for myself. It was for Sarah, the girl who had been caught in the middle of this twisted web. I thought of all the years she'd suffered, all the opportunities she'd lost. Her life had been destroyed because of their selfishness. And now, they were trying to walk away, as if nothing had happened. But I wasn't going to let that happen. I wiped my tears and picked up the phone. It was time to take control. "Attorney Chen," I said, my voice steady, my decision already made. "I need you to look into something for me. I want to make sure that everything Ryan left goes to Emily, but also that Sarah has her rightful share." The lawyer on the other end didn't hesitate. "Understood. We'll take care of it." I hung up the phone and exhaled. I wasn't going to let them get away with anything. Not anymore. The days passed in a blur, but each one brought me closer to the justice I was determined to see through. Linda kept coming around, playing the role of the concerned aunt, but I knew better. I saw through her lies, her manipulations. She thought she could continue to control Emily, to take what wasn't hers, but she was wrong. The final confrontation came sooner than expected. Emily returned home from her summer break, her eyes still red from the news she'd received about Ryan. She had cried for him, and part of me wished she hadn't had to know the truth so soon. But Emily was stronger than I had ever given her credit for, and she was ready to face the truth, just as I was. Linda, of course, couldn't resist the temptation. She showed up at my door the very next day, a false smile on her face, her eyes gleaming with her usual greed. "Anna, I think it's time we had a little chat," she said, her tone sweet but heavy with the bitterness I knew was coming. "You don't get to tell me what time it is," I replied coldly. "You've done enough damage. I'm taking the inheritance and making sure Emily gets everything she deserves. You, on the other hand, have nothing." Linda's smile faltered, but she quickly recovered, stepping closer to me, as though she could intimidate me. "You really think that's what's going to happen, don't you? That Emily is just going to accept all of this? That she'll take your side over mine? You never understood Emily, did you?" I said, my voice low but firm. "You thought you could manipulate her, control her, but she's not a fool. She knows who the real villain is in this story, Linda, and it's not me." At that moment, Emily walked into the room, her expression calm but resolute. She didn't say a word at first, just stood there, taking in the tension in the air. Linda's gaze flickered to her, but Emily didn't flinch. She looked Linda straight in the eye, and for the first time, I saw the strength in her that I had always known was there. "Aunt Linda," Emily said softly, her voice filled with quiet power, "I know everything now. I know the truth about Ryan and I know about Sarah. You can't hide it anymore." Linda's face twisted with rage, but Emily didn't back down. "I'm not going to let you ruin anyone else's life. Not anymore. You've done enough. I'm standing by my mother. And we're going to make sure this family's future is built on honesty, not lies." Linda's anger boiled over, but she had no power anymore. Everything she had tried to manipulate, everything she had planned, had fallen apart. There was no one left to fight for her cause. Emily had already chosen her side, and it was mine. As Linda stormed out of the house, cursing and swearing under her breath, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. For the first time in years, I could breathe freely, knowing that the truth had been revealed, that justice had been served. And then, in the quiet aftermath, Emily turned to me. "Mom, I'm sorry you had to go through all of this," she said, her voice full of empathy. "But you didn't deserve any of it." I pulled her into a hug, feeling her warmth, her strength, and in that moment, I knew everything would be okay. We had both been through so much, but we had made it through together. And that was all that mattered. As for Ryan, his death had not been the end of the story. It had been the beginning of something much more powerful. It had been the catalyst that transformed me. And in the end, it had shown me just how far I was willing to go to protect those I loved, and how much strength I had inside me. Ryan had thought he could erase the past with a will, with a confession, but the truth couldn't be erased. And in the end, the people who truly mattered were the ones who had stood by me all along. I smiled to myself, knowing that I had won, not because of the inheritance or the property, but because I had reclaimed my life, my dignity, and my family. I had outlasted them all.